We have a bit of breaking news that has just come in. Right now, the Iranian state media is telling the people of Iran that the Ayatollah has been killed. Again, Iran's state-run media is now confirming that the Ayatollah has been killed. Earlier, we had reported this, citing President Trump, citing leaders in Israel as well, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, first announcing this. But now we have it even from the Iranians, saying that the Ayatollah has been killed in those strikes. Gabe Gutierrez is still with us right now. So, Gabe, this reporting confirming what the president had said earlier, and again, we can't stress enough sort of the magnitude of this moment right now. He had been there since 1989. This may change the game completely for Iran, change the region. And from what we've seen now, this strike and this killing of the Ayatollah has now started a regional war. Where it ends, we don't know. How much further it goes from tonight and into the morning over there, we don't know. But still a monumental moment.
Monumental indeed, Tom. When we think about it, the United States taking out the supreme leader in conjunction with Israel, it is an incredibly historic moment here. And the president was alluding to this earlier in the day. He said that the people he had talked to, the intelligence, he believed that the Ayatollah had been killed. And now we have that acknowledgement from Iranian state media. Certainly a huge surprises here that, as Richard was talking about earlier, that this war has already spread to other countries throughout the region. But this new development that Iranian state television now confirming the death of the Ayatollah is certain to ripple across the world very quickly. Now, right now, Tom, the president is at his Mar-a-Lago estate. He's expected to return here to Washington tomorrow. Politically here in Washington, Democrats are vowing to force a vote to restrict his war powers next week. But really, Tom, with Republicans so far largely in lockstep with the president today, those votes aren't likely to go very far or do much other than to give lawmakers a chance to get their opposition on the record. But here, that's what's happening in Washington. Across the world, this news that the Ayatollah is confirmed dead raises a lot of questions about how long this conflict drags on for, how long and how much American troops get dragged into this war. Certainly, we will be looking for any White House reaction in the next couple of hours. But again, the president had said it earlier today, and now we're getting that official confirmation from the Iranians. Hugely significant.
Okay, Gabe Gutierrez, stand by for us still at the White House. I do want to bring in Michael Froman. He's the president of the Council on Foreign Relations. Michael, thanks for joining our special broadcast. As you just heard us report here, Iranian state media now confirming the Ayatollah has been killed. Talk to us about who you think is in charge right now in Iran. Is it the president, Pezeshkian? Is he now the leader? And cannot be checked by anyone else? Or is there some kind of theocratic leader? Is there another cleric that will take over?
Well, first of all, Tom, I think there's just a lot of uncertainty right now, exactly what's happening on the ground. You mentioned the president, who evidently is alive and is still there, but there's also Larijani, who's the national security head and who has really been the power behind the throne and the Ayatollah's number two for some time. And so whether he's a transitional figure until something further happens remains to be seen. He's not a cleric, so he can't be really a successor in the form of an Ayatollah, but we have to see how that plays out. And I think that's the real question: is what happens now? Now that senior leaders have been killed, will people rise up? How will the various dynamics within Iran, including the role of ethnic minorities there, the Azeris, the Kurds, Arabs, and others, how will that play out? And ultimately, what does that mean for the future leadership of Iran?
The UN has already discussed this. Countries like China have come out and condemned the attack by the U.S. and by Israel on Iran. What do you think the role of both the UN is and other major nations across the world now that Iran is, it may descend into chaos? It's unclear. I mean, this is all still fresh. We'll see what happens. But a regional war is underway, or at least a conflict right now.
Well, look, on one hand, I think with the exception of China, Russia, maybe North Korea, very few countries are going to cry tears for the loss of this regime. It's been an evil regime that has wreaked havoc across the region and sponsored terrorism and challenged U.S. interests and interests of Western countries and Gulf countries for some time. On the other hand, there is clearly some discomfort with the fact that the U.S. did it unilaterally with Israel, and the other countries are sort of wrestling with that. I think there's a lot of cynicism, frankly, particularly in the region, with countries in the region perhaps saying they're uncomfortable with it, but privately being quite gratified that there will potentially be an opportunity for a new Iran. This leadership had been in place, effectively for 47 years, and there hasn't really. It was unclear. It was uncertain that there would ever be a real change in Iran's fundamental strategy towards the region, towards Israel, towards U.S. interests until there is a change.
Michael, explain that to our viewers, right? Because people watching this right now may wonder, Iran. How has Iran attacked the United States? And in many ways they have, right? Through terrorism, through building drones that wanted to kill U.S. soldiers, through funneling money to Hamas that ended up killing Israelis as well and committing terrorism all across the world. Iran's fingerprints are over all of that evil.
Yes, I mean, for decades, of course, and when there's been efforts to kill American troops who stationed in the region, successful efforts. They've killed several hundred American troops over the years with their IEDs that they've designed. As you said, they provided drone technology now to Russia to attack Ukraine and our interests there. They've targeted Americans, and they have assassination orders out for various former American officials. So, this is not a regime that anybody wants to coddle or see in place for a long time, and it's been in place for effectively since the revolution, since 1979. And the question is, would it have ever changed of its own accord with a strong domestic security system that has effectively put down any opposition and put down previous protests? It was unclear it was going to change under its own regard. Having said that, the U.S. taking action by itself without congressional authorization, with allies uncomfortable, that's going to be the debate for the next several weeks, I imagine.
Michael Froman from the Council on Foreign Relations. Michael, we thank you for your time. I want to bring in senior national security correspondent Courtney Kube. Courtney, we just gotten the breaking news. It's 5 o'clock in the morning in Iran, and Iranians have been probably up all day and night because of these attacks on their country and the news that the Ayatollah possibly had been killed. And now state-run media in Iran confirming what you reported earlier right on our air, what the president had told the American people: the Ayatollah is dead.
Yeah. And I mean, this is a huge blow to the regime. One of the questions that we have had for the last several weeks as the Trump administration has slowly ticked towards this military action in Iran is the idea of regime change being inflicted or the catalyst to regime change being U.S. military or any other military action. And this is one of the ways that the U.S. and the Israelis in this case could inspire regime change in Iran. Now, we still do believe that the Israeli military, the IDF, is the one who was more focused on the strikes against the leadership, including the one against the Ayatollah here, and others. We are still working on information and confirmation about other Iranian leaders, especially from the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, who may have been targeted and injured or killed in the strikes today. The U.S. military was more focused on infrastructure, military and security targets, not so much on the leadership. But this is definitely expected to have an impact on the ground there, especially now that Iranian state TV and state media are acknowledging that the Ayatollah was killed. This is what we've been waiting for, Tom, right? We had heard from the Israelis, we heard from the United States, but we were really waiting for any kind of recognition out of Iran, and that's what we have now. Now the question is, how do the people there react?
Courtney, can we take a moment and just talk about the Israeli intelligence and the U.S. intelligence when it came to this mission? They had targeted, it was reported, the Ayatollah before during Operation Midnight Hammer. He was able to escape at a moment's notice. We knew the president was injured. The president of Iran was also injured in that attack, but also was able to escape. But this right now, they were able to take the Ayatollah out along with a lot of the senior leadership in Iran. And this military planning, at least from the U.S. side, goes from Venezuela right over to Iran. It felt like in the blink of an eye. I know it's been a month or two since January, but I mean, incredible intelligence assessments.
Absolutely. And the Israelis do have excellent intelligence on Iran and on Iranian leaders. Remember, this isn't the first time that they've been able to strike and target with extreme precision leaders in Iran. They've done the same with some of the Iranian proxy networks, specifically Hezbollah and Lebanon and others. So that does not surprise me. And the U.S. and Israel, working in conjunction, have shown not only the level of intelligence to be able to target some of these leaders, but also the military capability. And in the case of the Israelis, when you think about the pager bombs and things in Lebanon, at times they have shown the ability to really plan for months and years to make some of these missions actually happen. So that part doesn't surprise me. One thing that I have been shocked about and not been able to figure out all day since we first got the call at 1 o'clock this morning that this had all started is why the U.S. and Israel decided to conduct these strikes and begin this mission in daylight. That's really uncommon. Midnight hammer, the back and forth volley between Israel and Iran in 2024 and into 2025, and then the Venezuela, the raid to interdict Maduro. All of those have taken place at night, and there's a reason for that. It's frankly just safer for the air assets and for the men and women who are involved. This was in daylight. And I do wonder if maybe that was part of the intelligence gathering process here. They found that some of these individuals would be together at a certain time. It was in daylight, and they had to take advantage of that opportunity. I mean, candidly, Tom, that's the only thing that makes sense for the timing of the strikes.
It stands to reason. I thought the exact same thing, especially when we're seeing the videos as well, and a lot of them were during the daytime. Courtney, so great to have you. Stand by for us. I do want to bring in someone else, Iranian-American journalist and NBC News analyst, Houman Majd. Houman, so great to see you. For our viewers at home who may not know you, for anyone at NBC News who does anything with Iran, reporting any major interview that we do, we start with Houman because he is such an expert and he has covered the region so extensively over the decades. Houman, your reaction first when you see the banner and you look down and it says Iranian state media, Ayatollah Khamenei is dead. What do you think?
It's huge. I mean, for the Iranian people who have lived with him as a supreme leader now for, almost 4 decades, it's just unimaginable for many Iranians. I think there are some Iranians, perhaps many Iranians, who are celebrating the fact that he is no longer the supreme leader, especially after the January protests and the crackdown on the protests, which was commanded from the supreme leader. And then there are others, potentially some religious people who followed him, both in Iran, Shia faithful in Iran, but also in Iraq and in Bahrain and places like that, who may be saddened by the fact that an Ayatollah, after all, a cleric, the equivalent of a cardinal in the Catholic Church, has been assassinated, essentially. So there's within Iran, I would say most people are looking forward to the next phase. What happens next? And it's not clear yet what happens next. As Courtney has pointed out, as people have pointed out throughout the day on NBC, we really don't know. The constitution in Iran allows for a leadership change. Supposedly, if this was happening not in wartime, there would be a council of 3 members, one from the Guardian Council, a cleric, one from the judiciary, the chief of the judiciary, and one from the presidency, the president himself, who would run Iran basically as the supreme leader, as a council, until the new supreme leader was elected. However, at wartime, things could be different. We still do have the Revolutionary Guards. We still have them in power. Nobody has defected yet. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of what's going to come next. Is the supreme leader going to be replaced by another supreme leader? How does that happen during wartime while there's war still going on? None of this is very clear. And people like Larijani, former IRGC general, who was then for many years Speaker of Parliament. The current Speaker of Parliament, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, also former IRGC person, extremely powerful. Those two have not been, as far as we know, targeted, and if they were targeted, have not died. Ali Shamkhani, another IRGC, a former admiral actually in the Navy, a top security official, was targeted in the 12-day war in June, but survived. The Israelis are claiming that he died in this attack. We don't know yet. So there's a lot of unknowns in terms of what's going to happen with the regime moving forward. But in terms of regime change, certainly nothing has happened yet in terms of a drastic change of the actual regime.
Yeah. And then, Houman, before we let you go, I do want you to paint the picture of life in Tehran right now, in Iran, because it's a place where they're having trouble even getting water, right, for people to even bathe or to drink water in Tehran, in their capital. It's a place where banks are running out of money. People can't get the money out of their banks. It's a place where gas may cost you 10 cents a gallon, but there's no job to go to right now. And yeah, less. And it's a place where, as a protester, the moment you leave your house, you enter a demonstration knowing you may either be killed or imprisoned for just stepping out of your house, right? And yet all those brave protesters showed up day after day for so many weeks because they wanted change. And so what happens to life now in Iran?
Well, I mean, right now everything's uncertain. I was able to reach some family in Tehran, and they were safe. There are a lot of people who are trying to leave Tehran. And in fact, there's reports that they've changed the roads to the north of Iran to one-way roads, so all these cars could actually get out of Tehran. So right now, at this point, even despite President Trump's call for people to rise up and take over the government, no one is doing that yet. And as you pointed out, Tom, there's a lot of fear because the Revolutionary Guards, the Basij, are out on the streets, and they will put down any protests if there were any protests. And so far, we haven't seen any of that, no evidence of that yet. People are afraid. People are running for their lives. School children were just killed. That's been confirmed in a southern town by a missile. I don't think it was intentional necessarily, but there were numbers of children killed. And there's, a fear, sadness. People are afraid of bombs falling on their heads in Tehran. But yes, the economy is horrible. People don't have money. People don't have enough to buy basic goods, meat, eggs, things like that. And so there's a lot of misery, and the change is going to be welcome. Change is going to be welcome.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.